No, we got the draft right around the corner. And the draft is an interesting time, man. Like you see all these mock drafts coming out. Who is this? Who is that? Who's a surefire prospect? But those guys know nothing because they're not sitting in the rooms, just like we know nothing.
Right.
But we're here to just kind of talk about, pretty much like recap a couple of these position groups over the years on the offensive side of the ball and how it compares to the draft class coming out this year and how we don't have that like generational talents like we usually have.
Yeah.
Um, Starting things off, obviously we got the offensive lineman coming out. And if you go back to the 2013 draft, the Cowboys, they got absolutely ripped for trading back and drafting Travis Frederick, but they also were able to get Terrence Williams in that deal as well, who was a serviceable player. He was a good number two. And then if you go down the list of the linemen in that draft, man, the number one overall pick was Eric Fisher. That's a decent pick, like
Yeah.
he was
Franchise tackle.
yeah,
Sure.
he was never like an elite guy, but he played. Second overall pick, Jacksonville took Luke Jokel. I honestly have no idea who that is. Like that's kind of crazy. And
I feel like he had some good years though. You know what I'm saying?
you think so?
Number two overall. Worthy? Probably not though.
No,
So,
absolutely not.
no.
But like going down the list, man. So from pick one, Eric Fisher is serviceable, all the way to pick 203, Baltimore took Ryan Jensen, and Ryan Jensen still balls. So
Yeah.
you can grab you a lineman anywhere in the draft. Another example would be in 2014. Kind of similar to this draft class. There's guys sprinkled all over the place, and not all of them are going to hit. But it depends on your idea of a hit when it comes to offensive line. Like, are you looking for an anchor, or do you already have an anchor but he needs help? So it's kind of like obviously you hope you can get another anchor, but that's not always the case.
Especially, I mean, in the first round, I think you got to look at it from just looking at it and saying, hey, look, if I'm gonna draft a guy early, especially like top 10, top 15 or whatever,
Right.
whatnot. But if you're in the first round period, I think the mindset is, hey, I'm gonna get a guy that's at least gonna make it onto his second contract, who hopefully I can keep him around 10 to 15 years. Because if you're sticking around that long, we're gonna call it a hit. You know what I
Right.
mean? Whether there's a starter, everybody ain't gonna be a blue chip player, everybody ain't gonna be a generational talent. But if you got a guy that, you know what I mean, that sticks around in your team that long, obviously he's done something right. And if like you said about the offensive tackles and about the guards, this is a position that, over the years, it's a hit. The hit rate is crazy. You know what I
Right.
mean? You know what I mean? The best guys, they come in there early. But even sprinkled throughout the draft every once in a while, you can still find your gems. But in the first round, generally, you get your guys right there, and most of the impact players that you'll find be right there in the first round.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Different from other positions for sure.
No, absolutely.
Like we
Right.
know, like the guards are not heavy in the first round, which is why you got Steve Avila everywhere from like the second to the first. And then, you know what I mean, Mafia, obviously third round, the second round. They don't really have an idea of these guys. But, you know what I mean, if they was to go in the first round, we wouldn't be surprised. Like, the Cowboys drafted Tyler Smith last year. People's like, what you drafting Tyler Smith right there for? I mean, if you like your guy, you go get him. Cowboys felt good about him. You look at the redrafts right now, and, you know what I mean, they got him as high as like the fourth player off the board. And, you know what I mean, with the top guard, top tackle. So, I mean, that just goes you to show you, you know what I'm saying? You go get your guy. You don't really think too much about what everybody else think. And then the crazy thing about it, we don't know what these teams' boards are looking like. It's
Exactly.
line season. You know what I mean? They tell us one thing, they move it another way. I know you like to always bring up the Bill Belichick, Cole Strange thing. A lot of people laughed at it, but you get your guy.
It's
As well as Travis Frederick, you know what I mean? We all know how that goes. Cowboy fans, like, satisfied, for
to
sure.
that point with Cole Strange, like he got ripped draft night. But looking at it, like he started last season and he
Yeah.
probably has a guard for the next 10 years. Like without a doubt, he has a starter there. And sure, you could have waited till the third round, but if he's not there, then what? You know what I mean? And Belichick, like historically, doesn't draft well. So for him to reach on a guy, like it kind of makes sense for that to work.
Yeah, and like I said, like when these players are, you can't go into it saying, hey, I'm not going to take this guy at pick 26
Right.
or 25, wherever you are, because when I come back around, he's going to be there. That's the thing. You don't know who's drafting what, who's going to be there, who likes a little bit, these players a little bit more. Even if we was to reference Tyler Smith again, Cowboy fans was a little outraged. It was like, why you draft a second round, third round player, and then like a week or two later, you hear Tennessee or certain teams was behind them waiting to draft this guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's all over the place. But one thing we know is like a franchise left tackle is invaluable. You
Right.
get you a guy like that, you ain't got to worry about that position for 13, 14, 15 years. We done seen guys 35, 37 years old still balling. What's the guy that retired at the Super Bowl last year for the Rams?
Oh, Andrew Whitworth.
Yeah. shit,
Yeah.
he could have came back last year and still been one of the top 5 tackles in this league last year. So it just goes to show you a position like that, why is, valued a little bit more than everything else, man.
No, for sure. And then like looking at this draft class now, like I do think Paris Johnson is going to be the top tackle taken off the board. Like he is the most like athletic of the group in my opinion. But I know a lot of people got Skoronski up there, and I'm just not the biggest fan of Skoronski. Like I don't know what it is. Like something about him. I got him number 3 on my board. Number 2, I love Steve Avila. I think that man is a dog, and he's played everywhere on the offensive line. So if you need a center, like if you're good at guard, put him at center.
Right.
Whatever. Like as long as he's comfortable there and he can make it work. But I think like ceiling wise, it's Paris Johnson, Avila, and then Osiris Torrance. I think you can get Skoronski in there, and he'll play. But like I said, it depends on what you're looking for. Like if you're looking on like a guy without a high ceiling at tackle, I think that's Skoronski. Like he's probably going to be average, like decent, but like will start for you. Whereas I think like Paris Johnson could be like a premier left tackle.
Yeah, I think Torrance a beast too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's weird because I look at it and I think that as far as the tackle position, you got a lot of guys out there that you can kind of throw your dart at, good players.
Right.
That I think the hit rate going to be nice on the tackles this year. Guard is not really that deep. So I do think a lot of guys will be pushed up, but I do think Avila is the top guy. Whether he falls in the second, drops a little bit more first, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes even a lot earlier than everybody expecting, just because, a premium position. And a guy like that, he is a good player. So, I like him. Like, if you look at him on film, everything I've heard about him, I see him. He plays with a lot of power. That's a play you plug and play. I like it.
And I think without a doubt, Philly's taking a lineman at pick 10. Like their offensive line is getting older, and that does seem like the move for them to make this season. Because what else do they need? To talk tight end, like looking at like the 2017 draft class, you had O.J. Howard, Evan Ingram, David Njoku coming out, and those guys were all first rounders. But then it's like I just have a thing with first round tight ends; they don't seem to work out. And tight ends, they also take a long time to develop. Like you don't just show up as a tight end and ball out. It usually takes a couple of years.
Right.
So with that in mind, like these guys that they're trying to mock out, Kincaid, Washington, Mayer, Musgrave, like there's not going to be 3 or 4 tight ends taken in the first round. That's not going to happen. And I just don't see it being like a generational talent at tight end. Like Kyle Pitts, that made sense at the time for him to go in the first round. At 4, absolutely not.
Right.
That's like an all-time bad spot. But in that same draft class, pick 146, you had George Kittle, a hidden gem in that draft, who outshines all of those guys. So you don't have to force a tight end in the early rounds. You can always get a guy later. Schultz is a perfect example. Blake Jarwin, guys of that nature.
Kelsey.
And then you go, Kelsey.
Top tight end in the draft. You know what I'm saying? It goes on and on though.
You go on to the 2018 draft. You had Hayden Hurst drafted in the first round by Baltimore, who lost his job to the third round pick that season, which was Mark Andrews. So it's like taking a tight end this early is just so risky. And I don't see it at tight end this year. Like I don't, especially like Darnell Washington. Like he's a beast, yes, but he wasn't even the best tight end on his team.
Facts.
That guy's coming out, what is it, Stalker or whatever? He's coming out next year. He was way better. Not that Darnell's not nice. Like he is nice, but how can I take you in the first round when you're not the best tight end on your team?
And it's weird. You would hear certain people say they like the tight ends a little bit more than the receivers in this draft. How they feel about them is all over the place. But like you say, like historically, drafting a tight end in the first round just doesn't work. What I mean? You think back to about Tyler Eifert. I know you spoke about Noah Fant.
Eric Ebron.
Facts. These are guys, we hear it every year. This a can't miss prospect. He's fast. He got all the hands. He got all the traits. But as you also said, it takes a little bit longer to develop. And there's something about these guys in the 3rd or 4th round, these gritty tight ends that has something to prove. And it's just how it shakes out, man. So I'm with you on the fact that I wouldn't touch a tight end in the first round. You catch some of these guys in the 2nd and 3rd round, and I think the hit rate is a lot higher throughout the draft than the first round. Because if you was to look at the first round tight ends over the last 10 years, you would be like, none of these guys are really stars outside of maybe any of them. I don't think any of them are. That's the crazy part about it.
No first round tight ends work.
Yeah. So looking at it from that aspect, I don't think if you like a guy, you say, I'm not going to take him based off of tight end hasn't been as a position in general. I get it. You know what I mean? If you like a guy that much, I'm not going to say don't take him. But it better be worth it of it if that's the pick you're going to make. Like, I know Atlanta's looking back at it like, why did I take a Justin Fields or one of these premier defenders in the draft?
Right.
And now you got a Kyle Pitts that's going on year 3. We still over here like, can he reach his potential or not? He's supposed to be the surefire Hall of Famer at that.
You know that little meme with like the stick and he's like poking the thing, he's like, do something? That's all of us with Kyle Pitts, bro. Like, come on.
Especially for fantasy, man. He's like, every year I'm just like, top 10 pick, top 20, man, I'm taking him. Nothing. So I think I
can't touch that.
Yeah. But I think it just goes all over the place. I mean, if like you're right, you think about tight end, generally in some of these positions that you will draft in the first round. Yes, it goes back to the lineman. You know what I mean? I think the trenches is where it's at. We'll talk about defense, at a later date. But on the offensive side, like, get you a tackle, get you unless you're going to go get a quarterback. I feel like that's the only position in the draft where I feel like maybe he doesn't have to be worthy of being the best player in the draft. But if you can get a franchise quarterback, then that changes your whole franchise. So just make sure if you're trading up, you getting your guy, he better be the right guy because you might get fired for it.
But see, at the same time, I feel like with the Colts, they got pick 4. You want Will Levis or do you want Paris Johnson?
Because if you get Will Anderson or something,
right? Like somebody that's like the quarterbacks. Like this year's just not the year for it. Of course, it'll happen. There'll be inflation on quarterbacks, but the talent is elsewhere. Like I don't see how you can't draft a wide receiver 6 this year. That can't happen.
It's no generational talent.
Exactly.
It's not. You know what I mean? And just looking at that, you think back over all the years, right? In every draft, and it comes out and and that guy that we know who's coming up is Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not in this draft, but if you hear it, all these teams are waiting on him. Generational talent.
Exactly.
That's the guy that goes top 5. That's your Chase. You heard about Amari Cooper coming out.
Megatron.
Yeah, Megatron.
Julio, those guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking back at it from that standpoint, over the last years, it really hasn't been that guy. And then it's crazy because just the hit rate on it, it's been throughout the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That the top guy coming off the board would be the best receiver in that draft. I think if the generational talent is not there, obviously it changes depending on how deep the draft is certain positions. You know what I mean? Will they go a little bit higher? I mean, I get it. But, I mean, if you used to look back, I'm looking back at 2013, you get a Tavon Austin drafted over a D-Hop. Tavon Austin's a top 10 pick, 8th overall. The Cardinals are able to wait all the way to pick 26 and snag up a guy like that. And it goes on and on. Robert Woods was in that draft, 2nd round pick. Keenan Allen also 3rd round pick. Terrence Williams. Kenny Stills was in the 5th. But it's crazy. Sammy Watkins, 4th overall pick, right? And to see him at 4th overall, but the same guys in that draft, you have a Mike Evans at 7. This was a deep draft though. OBJ at 12, Brandon Cooks at 20, Devontae Adams in the 2nd round. It's not really a firm point. If he's a generational talent, I will say this. I think Sammy Watkins was coming out. He was viewed at that guy, but all of these guys that people say are exceptional, generational talents, it just changes from year to year. We hear it all the time. You know what I mean? Even to the running back position, but just to stick with the receivers, it's not really a deep draft. And if I was to think about a comparable draft, I was looking back at the 2018 draft. You know what I mean? You had a DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley in there, Cortland Sutton, a lot of guys that we didn't really know who was the best. It depends on how you viewed them, but it wasn't really that guy that was clear cut above the rest. You know what I mean?
Right.
So just looking at this draft, I look at it it's all over the place. I like Quentin Johnson personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he was the 3rd receiver taking off the, out of the 3. You know what I mean? And end up being the best guy. But Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think he got a lot of talent. I hear you talk about Addison a lot. You know what I mean? I like Addison. But the difference is, I wouldn't be surprised if Zay Flowers was to come into this thing and mess around and be the 2nd best receiver in this whole draft. And that's how I look at it. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it's not a top guy. I don't think you really should be reaching, top 15, unless, you think it's your guy or whatever. But it can go all over the place, to be honest.
And it sucks at receiver too, because it all depends on your landing spot, how we judge you. Kyle Pitts has had no one to throw him the ball. Drake London had no one to throw him the ball. Jamar Chase, he went to Burrow and balled out. You know what I mean? But Cincinnati was going to be good. They just had bad picks that year because Burrow blew his knee out. So it's your landing spot does matter. George Pickens, man, we saw flashes this
Mm.
year. If Kenny Pickett was better, he probably would have been the best rookie.
He's
Same with Garrett Wilson. His production was all season long on that roller coaster ride at quarterback.
and the jury is still out on that, man. I wouldn't be surprised if Jameson Williams was to come back from the injury and just light things up. We still
Right,
waiting on a John Mechie. It was a lot of talent in the draft last year, you know what I mean? But I don't think it's a guy or two or three that can be going within pick 20 like it was last year.
right,
You know what I mean? But you know, man, I do think it's a lot of talent there. It's just not that clear cut guy, that generational talent. So when you look at it, it's a lot of guys. Like I like Josh Downs. I think he's a nice receiver. You think about Tank Dell, more explosive receiver, short guy. It's a lot of smaller guys, you know what I mean? But it's a lot of guys that you can get deeper in the rounds that we wouldn't be surprised if to look at this thing like 2 or 3 years from now and to sit there and say, damn, like the best guy in this draft was drafted in the second round or third round. I wouldn't be surprised at all. You know what I mean? We look back at the draft at Amon St. Brown, you know what I mean? He was a 4th round pick.
right.
And he's lighting it up, you know what I mean? So definitely it's weird at the receiver position, depends on you like. And then another one, if we're going to stick on the offense side of the ball, is running back, right?
Yeah,
Now, it's weird, right? When I think about the running backs in this draft and what I would kind of view that as is like when Saquon came out. Right?
Right.
You had that clear-cut guy who was clear-cut above the rest, but he was supposed to be this generational talent. Obviously, in hindsight, the Giants take that guy thinking, hey, he transcends your offense. He's a generational talent. We hear all these things about Bijan Robinson, right?
right,
But the one thing we know about the running back position is, hey, all these guys are injured. You know what I mean? And every year, the same way, the hit rate hasn't been the same. Like the best guys, if you think about it, you got Leonard Fournette. He's getting taken over CMC. It's on and on. Like Zeke, I think it's debatable. You could have waited and got a Derrick Henry in the second round. I think, like for the Cowboys' sake, I thought, Jalen Ramsey here and Derrick Henry. Just imagine.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you know what I mean. But who had a better career? I think is debatable. You know what I mean. Zeke falling off, Henry. We'll see. We'll see if he got some juice left. But
Right.
so how you feel about that though, as far as the running back position in general?
I do feel like prime Zeke is better than prime Derrick Henry. I just want to put that out there. Zeke in his prime, bro, was crazy. Derrick is crazy, but he just has the longevity on his side.
How long was Zeke prime?
For like 2 seasons, bro, Zeke was untouchable.
Yeah, you know what I mean? He was unreal. Yeah.
No, this running back class, man, Bijan, he shouldn't make it out of the top 10. He is that kind of like Reggie Bush type talent coming out. He didn't get a Heisman, and he wasn't in like the spotlight like a Derrick Henry was, because Texas hasn't been the best, but he was a bright spot on that team, and I do think he can change some franchises. But if you're taking a running back, like let's say, obviously like Houston, you got Dameon Pierce, you're not doing that. Seattle, you just got Kenneth Walker, that's not happening. Philly, maybe, like, but I just feel like you would be better off taking a guard in that situation.
And it's crazy because the 2 guys you just named, you know what I mean, Dameon Pierce, that's a 4th round pick.
Right.
Phenomenal. You know what I mean? You think about Isaiah Pacheco last year, 7th round pick. You know, you think about Breece Hall. He was a 2nd round pick. Kenneth Walker as well. Like these guys, I think the hit rate as far as the running backs is all throughout the draft. Even when you think back to the CMC, you know what I mean? If I was to tell you, hey, like, we got a Dalvin Cook is sitting here in the 2nd round. We got an Alvin Kamara that's going to later on come out in the 3rd round.
Right.
You can get these guys in and out the draft. And you can plug and play and get you a start at any round, you know what I mean? And not only that, I can keep adding on. Brian Robinson Jr. came out last year. And before he got injured, I was watching him in preseason like, hey, you know what I mean? This guy's the real deal. So I think if you look at that in comparison to it, man, yes, Bijan Robinson, he's all what they say. He's an explosive guy, in and out the tackles, beast. He has the vision. But then you have guys like Jamar Gibbs, who I think, hey, man, in the right team, or like, would you be surprised if he was to have a better career than a Bijan Robinson? I wouldn't.
It's going to depend on landing spot, because if you go in the top 10, your situation probably sucks. But like if Dallas takes Gibbs at 26, bro, he's going to shine. You know what I mean? Like he's already a step ahead behind that offensive line, or like a Kansas City, something like that. You know what I mean?
Then like, I think it makes sense to draft them at 20. You know what I mean? If you get into Bijan Robinson right there, obviously you punch him in the clock instantly. You know what I mean? But top 10, or like if Philly was to take him at 10, yes, I would be sitting there like, damn, like he's going to look damn good in that offense. But at the same time, is that the smart pick for Philly? I don't really think it is. You know what I mean?
Only for a short window, I feel like. Like you got to think of that as like a 4-year plan. But if you get like say Avila right there at pick 10, like that's in your 10-year plan. You know, so
That's
it just
another thing. No
depends.
way Avila goes that high. You know what I mean? But
Right.
like Kenny, I mean, generally I don't think teams view him that high, but I mean, that position is like you say, you got a guy who could possibly be there for 5 years versus a guy that's gonna be there 12. Which one you want on your team?
Exactly.
So
Well, and then especially with Philly, like they do need to get another tackle in the building. Lane Johnson is on his last leg. He's much older, and why keep paying him all that money when his health is in question now?
thanks.
But nah, Gibbs at 26, I think is outrageous from a Dallas point of view. But Bijan at 26, sign me up all day.
Yeah, I tell you. But I mean, it's a lot of guys in this draft, man. You know what I mean? All of them look good. You know, me personally, I like Kendrick Miller.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He's a beast. Chase Brown from Illinois, man. It's a lot of guys that, you know what I mean? If you look at it, 3 to 4 or 5 of these guys, maybe even more, you don't know, but it's a lot of guys that can go into an offense and be starters. And if you can get you a starter, I look at it like this. If you can get you a starter past the first round is usually your guy like, hey, this should be my blue chip or my 10-year starter.
Right.
Second round, you should be generally looking at it like I'm shooting for another star, but you know going into it, likelihood of that is probably not as high, but I could still give me a good player. Third round on, if you can just take a player and get another starter for 5 to 6 years, then I think that's an awesome play. You know what I mean? So
Right.
can't knock it. But you know what I mean? Over the years, I just think with that position, the smart thing to do, me personally as a Cowboy fan, I'm kind of hoping he doesn't fall to 26. As much as I want him, but I think it'll be a lot smarter for somebody else to fall to us. We continue to build through the trenches, and you get you a guy later on. But I mean, if I'm taking, like you said, if he's there, then you know what I mean. I'm chilling and I'm eating my popcorn and I'm gonna talk trash with the rest of the Dallas communities because you know what I mean. He's that
If
type of
he's
dude.
there, that's BPA without a doubt.
For sure.